So, what happened to the Martian war machines from the 1953 classic War of the Worlds? Let's find out. Movies,
music, and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. So, the original War of the Worlds novel was first published in 1898. Then, after that, there was The Night That Panicked America radio drama by Orson Welles in October of 1938. But it's the 1953 theatrical version that we're going to be talking about today. Now, this film was produced by the legendary George Pal, who was also the producer of Houdini, The Time Machine. Video on that coming soon. When Worlds Collide, and so many more. Now, this adaptation takes place in Southern California rather than the Victoria-era England, which is where the novel is set. Now, right before the film actually starts, there's this incredible narration over this black and white footage that precedes the credits, and that really energetic dialogue came from a voice actor called Paul Frees.
And now, fought with the terrible weapons of super science, comes the War of the Worlds.
Do you recognize that voice? Well, you should if you've ever been to a Disney park. Paul Frees is the voice of the ghost host at Disney's Haunted Mansion.
Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion.
Super cool. Then, from black and white, we're immediately transported into amazing 3-strip Technicolor, which was a film stock where 3 rolls of film go through the camera at the same time. Red, green, blue. And there's a reason why that's important, and we'll get to that in just a minute. The cast was just outstanding. You got Gene Barry as Dr. Clayton Forrester, and believe it or not, this was only his second film. Also starring Anne Robinson as Sylvia Van Buren. Now, this film was not the first attempt ever made by a studio to get War of the Worlds going. Paramount first attempted to adapt the War of the Worlds back in 1925 when the studio bought the rights to the novel. But nothing happened. Then an outline was started with Cecil B. DeMille directing, but that never happened either. Even Alfred Hitchcock was interested in developing War of the Worlds into a film adaptation. But again, no dice. Never happened. Ha! Could you imagine War of the Worlds directed by Alfred Hitchcock? I don't know. Maybe. Anybody who's into classic sci-fi and monsters knows the name Ray Harryhausen. This guy really wanted to bring War of the Worlds to the screen. In fact, he wanted it so bad he actually shot his own incredible stop-motion test footage. He shopped it around, but eventually the studio said, nope, we're giving it to George Pal. And things really started to go forward quickly. George originally wanted to do a project that was more faithful to the original book, but of course the executive says, no, you gotta have romantic involvement. God, film executives. I never knew this, and it kind of sounds like an interesting idea, but originally the third act was supposed to be filmed in 3D. I don't know, that might have been cool, but the plan was dropped. Kind of bizarre, George Pal was really good friends with Walter Lantz, who created Woody Woodpecker, and apparently if you look close in the opening shot of the meteor coming down, there's a Woody Woodpecker in the tree. I don't know. I really don't see it, but hey, you never know. The amazing miniatures that weren't really miniatures, I mean, these things were enormous, were some of the most realistic miniatures ever filmed for any movie up to that point. All the tanks in the battle sequences, those were real. They actually went out and got the Arizona National Guard to come in. And now, the war machines. Let's talk about the incredible war machines. Now, the producer, director, and creative team absolutely did not want to have the stereotypical alien ships, you know, the saucers. The war machines were designed by a guy named Albert Nozaki, and they had that incredible manta ray style body with the cobra head coming over the top. Wow, so awesome. And really quite different. No, the war machines did not have tripod legs like they did in the book. People get so upset. It doesn't have tripod legs. The reason they didn't go that route was, 1, they felt it was too expensive, and 2, they didn't really want the war machines to be stop motion. However, if you look close when the Martian war machines are rising up out of the pit for the very first time, there are invisible-looking particle legs. 3 of them, like a tripod. Then, after that, you never see them again. Now, for some reason, and I'm not really sure why, these Martian war machines were made of copper. And during filming, they were held up with like 20 different wires and cables, some for electronics and some for just support. Then there's the classic awesome sound of the war machine heat ray. You know it. During my research, I actually found 2 different explanations for how they made that sound effect. The first being it was an orchestra playing notes that were written to somehow create that sound, and the second being 2 electric guitars distorted through amps and recorded backwards. It's a mystery. Lines are open. You decide. But for years, that exact same sound effect was used in tons of different children's TV shows and even in The Outer Limits. It was really cool the way they made that fire shoot out for the heat ray. What they did was they took acetylene torches with a big fan and they shot the torch with a fan behind it, shot it against black, and then just superimposed it right over top of the war machines. Super cool, old school technology. There's just something about using a real model that looks, I don't know, real. Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Jaws, all perfect examples of why something that's physical always, to me, looks better. Now, the Martian war machines also had that really cool secondary weapon, the ones that would come out of the side. The sound of that was made exactly the same way that Ben Burtt made the blaster sounds for Star Wars. You go out to a high guide wire and bang it with a hammer. That awesome sound is also the sound of the photon torpedoes in the original Star Trek television series. And of course, the Army could do nothing against these incredible war machines. Why? They had shields that looked suspiciously like glass domes from a mantle clock. And that's exactly what they were. They took large glass domes, filmed them against black, superimposed them over the top. Really cool, practical effect. I love it. Then there's the Martian itself. Man, did that thing freak me out when I was a kid. It really did. A guy named Charlie Gamora and his daughter Diana were the ones that created this alien for the film. Charlie performed the physical movements of the Martian while his daughter was underneath blowing into tubes to get the veins going. Again, great old school technology. The Martian, according to Charlie's daughter, was really nothing more than a bunch of chicken wire, bandages, and latex. When they brought the Martian in for the first time for the director to look at, it was too tall. So they went home and ripped the whole thing apart overnight, tore parts of it down to make it smaller, and according to Diana, Charlie's daughter, when they went to film the next morning, the thing was still wet with latex because it hadn't cured yet, which she claims is one of the reasons it looked so cool. It looked like wet, transparent skin. Just a mistake that ended up looking great. And where is the Martian today? Nowhere. Pretty sure the thing just fell apart 5 minutes after filming. Now, back to the war machines. What happened to the 3 gorgeous war machines? Well, brace yourself. Like I said, the war machines were made out of copper, and when the shoot was over, they donated all 3 war machines to a Boy Scout troop to be melted down for a copper drive. Oh, the pain. What a shame. But that's just the way it went back in those days. Movie props just weren't revered back then the way they are today. They were just a tool, something that was created, used, done with it, throw it out. Now, I've had a whole bunch of people contact me and say, it's not true. They were used in the movie Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Well, sort of. Even though the 3 Martian war machines were melted down, they did use the original Martian war machine blueprints to create the ships for Robinson Crusoe on Mars. So, in a way, they kind of lived on. We need to talk a little bit about how the movie was filmed. Like I said, it was shot in 3-strip Technicolor. The Martian war machines were held up by a lot of wires. And you might remember watching War of the Worlds on television, or maybe even an early DVD, and going, look at all the wires. Well, there's a reason for that. It all has to do with the film stock. When this movie went into syndication for television, they took the 3-strip negatives and they put them on cheaper Kodak color stock. Cheaper film, lower color saturation, and different contrast. And because of those 3 things, whenever you watched this movie through the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you could see the wires. But in 2018, there was a 4K release on iTunes, and in 2020, there was a Blu-ray release where they went right back to the original 3-strip color process and made new 4K prints of this film exactly the way it would have been seen in the theaters. And you know what? You can't see the wires. They didn't digitally remove them. It's just that they went back to how the film was supposed to look. The War of the Worlds premiered February 20th, 1953 to incredible box office success, grossing over $2 million. And believe me, $2 million in 1953? Whew! That's a hit. The actual estate of H.G. Wells was so happy with the final production that they offered George Pal his choice of any of the other H.G. Wells stories to make into a film. And he chose The Time Machine. Like I said, video on that coming soon. Well, War of the Worlds was gone, but not forgotten. The War of the Worlds won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects and went on to influence other great sci-fi movies like Forbidden Planet. In 1988, there was a War of the Worlds TV show where Anne Robinson herself reprises her role as Sylvia in 3 episodes. That is awesome. In 2011, it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the United States Library of Congress, who deemed it culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And I couldn't agree more. And then there was a fairly successful remake in 2005, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you enjoyed that brief retrospect on The War of the Worlds. And if you're new to this channel and you like this stuff, please consider subscribing. I've got new content coming all the time, so stay tuned. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and I will do my best to try to answer them. And feel free to stop back anytime as we continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters. Movies,
music, and monsters.
Danger, danger.